Good morning and welcome to AI and the Future of Government, the 2024 William Donald Schaefer Policy Conference and Award Luncheon. It's a celebration of the legacy of William Donald Schaefer, who was city councilman, city council president, mayor of Baltimore, governor of Maryland, comptroller of Maryland, and above all, a citizen of Baltimore and Maryland. It's really great to see you all here again. Why is that table empty over there? Why don't you move on up? Let's get close. Let's get comfy. Anyway, it's really great to see you all in person again for this conference and a celebration of the outstanding public service legacy of William Donald Schaefer. I am Mike Golden, the Vice Chair of Schaefer Center for Public Policy's Board of Advisors. I also had the honor of working for Governor Schaefer's Assistant Press Secretary back in 1987, and then later served as his press secretary when he was comptroller. I was the one that was always saying what the comptroller meant to say was. If you knew Schaefer, you know what I'm talking about. I am sadly your MC for today. My first order of business is to bring greetings on behalf of our board chair, Bob Douglas, who may be listening, I'm not sure, but he is out of town with his family and unable to be here today. But I'd like to ask my fellow board members to please stand and be recognized. There they are. And I'm standing as well. As I said before, the topic of our conference today is AI, that's artificial intelligence, and the future of government. We have an exciting lineup of presenters today. Our conference will be followed by an award luncheon where we bestow upon Senator Ben Cardin the prestigious 2024 William Donald Schaefer Award. Do I have a list of... Well, we're also excited to welcome a host of civic officials, cabinet members, and elected officials joining us this morning, and they are, do I have a list? I can't see. Well, if you're important, stand up. How's that for an introduction? Oh, we got to start over again. Jay-Z's covering this live. We also like to welcome the faculty, administrators, staff, and students from the College of Public Affairs, and a special welcome to the current candidates in the Schaefer Center's Maryland Certified Public Manager program, as well as both student interns and their internship supervisors from the Schaefer Center's Next Gen Leaders for Public Service program. Would you all stand? Look at them, they're the future. The hashtag, whatever that means, for today's conference is hashtag SCPP2024. You got that? Okay, it's hashtag SCPP CONF 2024. Whew. Boy, there's a lot of information. Anyway, I don't even understand what hashtags are, let alone AI, but we're all going to learn about that. And to kick things off, we're going to hear from my favorite, Dr. Ann Cotten, Executive Director of the Schaefer Center.
Thanks, Mike. Hi, everyone. I'm Ann Cotten. I'm Executive Director of the Schaefer Center for Public Policy at the University of Baltimore. Thank you for being here today, and thank you to all the staff at the Schaefer Center for helping to put this on. It's a terrific opportunity to share a little bit about what we do here at the Schaefer Center to recognize our next-gen students, recognize our certified public manager candidates, and recognize the future of AI. So the Schaefer Center, for those of you who don't know, is an applied research and consulting entity, public service entity in the College of Public Affairs at the University of Baltimore. We prepare public servants for the challenges of tomorrow, part of why we're here today, help prepare you for those challenges. And we do that through our Maryland Certified Public Manager program. We do it through our Next Gen Leaders for Public Service program, our Schaefer Center Fellows program. We also inform decision makers with unbiased research. We do that in program evaluation, policy analysis, data analysis, all types of applied research. If you have a question, we can help you answer that. And we promote public discourse through conferences like the one we're having today. And I want to tell you that today is an important day. This is what? Public Service Week. So a couple important things happened in 1985. 1985 is when Ronald Reagan declared Public Service Week for the first time. And we honor almost 24 million public servants in state, local, and federal government. They're the people who keep things running, and that's why we're here today. The second thing that happened in 1985 is the Schaefer Center was founded. So that was a long time ago. And Governor Schaefer was still mayor of Baltimore, and a lot's happened since then. He's a graduate of the University of Baltimore. So today we're here to focus on AI in government. As we know, we're all under pressure to do more with less, to make better decisions. People have expectations of how we'll go about doing that, but we don't have as many people to do that. And we don't have the systems we used in the past aren't going to work today, and that's pretty clear. So in 2023, the Moore-Miller administration took several steps to modernize the Maryland Department of Information Technology, including appointing the first chief technology officer, a digital experience officer, a chief information security officer, a director of accessibility, and for our purposes today, the senior advisor for responsible artificial intelligence. So this is a big leap forward, and hopefully Maryland will be in the forefront. And I want to turn our podium back over today to Mike to get us started for the conference, but before I do that, apparently the University of Baltimore is in the forefront too. So a couple weeks ago, they announced this new program, which is Artificial Intelligence for Business. So this is a new degree program from the University of Baltimore and our Merrick School of Business. So we have information about this out at the table. Once you finish today, you'll decide you want to go and do that. Pursue this as a career, you'll have some resources there. So with that, I'll turn it back to Mike.
Let's hear it for Ann. I think it's time to spike the coffee, folks. We now introduce the opening session. We are honored to have amazing presenters who will provide insight to the current state of AI in Maryland. To start our journey, we wanted to provide a brief overview and a demonstration of AI. We are grateful to our next presenters who have deep knowledge and experience with AI. Andrew Kleine, a senior director at EY Parthenon, and Berke Attila, director for Baltimore City Department of General Services. Andrew is a nationally recognized leader in municipal finance and performance management. In his 25-year public service career, Andrew served as a White House budget examiner, federal CFO, big city budget director, and county chief administrative officer. His passion is helping governments get the most possible value from the resources and achieve great outcomes for the residents. Sounds like William Donald Schaefer. Berke Attila has a strong background in government and finance with a range of roles and responsibilities throughout his career, including serving as Chief Financial Officer for Baltimore City, DGS, then as the Montgomery County Director of the Office of Human Resources. His innovation has led to national recognition and awards. I'd like to introduce the two of them. Where are they?
Berke always takes care of the technical details for me. So I'm a budget guy at heart. I spent 10 years as budget director for the city of Baltimore. As Mike said, I really started my career in budgeting and have largely been in budgeting my entire career. And so when ChatGPT showed up, I immediately was thinking, okay, how do we use this thing for budgeting? And I learned pretty quickly I was not alone in asking that question. And I actually started a community through LinkedIn called the AI Budget Explorers. And we had our first meetup last fall. There were, I think, 5 people. And we've had 4 meetups. And the most recent one was last month, and there were over 30 people on that call. And I would describe myself as still very new and very curious about AI, and I think that describes a lot of the people in the Budget Explorers group. That probably describes a lot of you today, and that's why you're here. And so what we want to do, Berke and I, we're going to show you a demo. It's a use case, and I will be brief in my remarks so Berke can run through the demo, which I think is a great way to show you not only some basics about how to use ChatGPT, but also a very practical application. Just want to talk a little bit more about this Budget Explorers group. So we've been generating a lot of ideas about how to use AI in budgeting. We've had a lot of wonderful guest speakers. And just this past month, our guest speaker was a guy named Craig Maher. And if I can advance the slide. So Craig is the director of the Public Administration program at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. And he is also the editor-in-chief of a brand new journal called Public Finance, and it's kind of maybe a little less formal journal, a little more open to practitioners as well as academics. In any case, he and a couple of colleagues did an experiment where they used a couple different versions of ChatGPT and some of the programming applications that related to AI, and they were helping a small town in Nebraska do some financial analytics and just trying to understand what forms of ChatGPT were best at that. And the upshot is that advanced versions of ChatGPT are very powerful in doing analytical work that we used to take many hours for analysts to do, and it frees the analysts up to do higher order analysis, decision-making support, etc. And so this QR code takes you to that article. Also, will introduce you to this new journal that I think will be very valuable going forward. And some of the other. We've brainstormed a long list of possible uses in our group, everything from developing a training curriculum for budget analysts, drafting fiscal impact statements, even optimizing police staffing. And so there's a lot on the horizon with AI. And so for the demo, just to set that up, this is, I would call this a modern reenactment of a real-world analysis for a budget proposal. 15 years ago, we started outcome budgeting in the city of Baltimore, and outcome budgeting requires a budget proposal for every single service in city government, and it rewards innovation that drives higher value in service delivery. And so I hired Berke as one of the analysts to help me start outcome budgeting. And I hired him because I could see in him a highly analytical mind. And he had private sector experience trying to shave a couple cents off the cost of making custom countertops. And I thought that was very transferable to the kind of work we were doing and would do in the budget office. And so we had an award every year for the best budget proposal. So when Berke moved over to DGS as CFO, one of the performance measures that they were struggling with was the timeliness of their response to maintenance requests. And so Berke undertook a months-long analytical project that I think ran into some resistance within the department to figure out what was going on. Why were they late so many times? And so he's going to tell you about what they found and how AI makes that analysis, one, so much easier and quicker today, and also how AI can generate insights that even sophisticated use of those more traditional tools may not have uncovered. So I'm going to turn it over to Berke.
Thank you, Andrew. So for that setup, we had a mountain to climb. What we needed to figure out was why some of the work orders that we're dealing with has same problem, but it takes really different time depending on the location. We just couldn't figure out what it is. And in order to even get there, we really had to dive into a lot of work order data. And I want to first, before I give you the solution, I want to invite you into the universe that we were in, right? So we pulled this information from our work order management system. Most organizations have something like that. You call up, you assign, it could be a help desk for IT, it could be facilities management, fleet management, HR, SR, 311 calls, it doesn't matter. You have the data. We pulled to look at it, and I just wanted to show you, it looks like this. We have this massive spreadsheet, all of the building numbers, the names and the addresses, the request numbers, the problems description, what shop has been assigned, who's requested, when it's completed, how many days it was open, was there a preventative maintenance work completed by, and I asked the simple question to my analysts is, I wanted to really see and understand why certain simple, seemingly simple jobs takes long if they are farther from the main operations. In order to do that, if I ask you, if you have addresses and then work types, how many of you, raise of hands, can tell me you're comfortable with yourselves being able to do an analysis in Excel? Basically creating zones from a distance from City Hall for all of your buildings. You have an address, right? Then figuring out within those zones if there are specific jobs that are taking longer than usual. Raise your hands. Anybody in Excel writing a code? Babula, 1, 2, maybe. But my point is, when we were doing this, we realized that yes, it takes a lot longer when you are farther away from the main shop. That discovery led to us talking with the front line to understand when we dispatch them to these locations, they are not equipped with right parts. They don't have a P card to go and buy. They would have to come back to the main operations to be assigned to do something else. Therefore, the remote locations that are farther from City Hall were getting worse service for seemingly simple job like fixing a lock. But that discovery led to us writing a proposal, equipping a van, changing some procurement rules to be able to assign mom and pop shops to be able to sell stuff to us for our people. So when we send our people, now they have a van, they have parts in that van, they can address the problem right then and there, they don't have to come back, and if they need something else, they don't need to come back to the shop to get a P card authorization to buy something in 2 days to go there. They would do everything on site. So we write that proposal. We won the award, director, then budget director gave us the money to do that pilot, and then we see an incredible amount of satisfaction and decrease in the time that it takes to do the work orders. But I had analysts work on this for a long time, led by Babula, to get to that discovery. So, remember this slide? We have an ostensibly impossible challenge. I brought you into our challenge to do this analysis, and only a few of the people on this floor can do it, and then some of you might have analysts to do that. But the problem with that is you have many of these mountains to climb, but you have very little time for analysts, so that you have to always prioritize. So what basically, rather than climbing it, you might be dropped off at the summit, right? And what it does right now for us is, because you don't have to have the technical expertise to do these analyses anymore, you can basically speak plain English. If you have an idea, the help is here to take you to the summit, and then you can coast down from there. So I am going to attempt to try to do this live in front of you, reenact. I've created the prompts. And then the one thing good about the ChatGPT is you could ask your intention, provide your intention. I'm planning to do this analysis. What might be a good prompt? It'll even write you the prompt that you need to feed it back to it for it to do the work. So with that, I am now going to try to All right. So I have the ChatGPT, and I also did this wonderful thing here, and I have put in my prompts that it helped me create. So between, let's see if I could go. All right, the first prompt that I want to ask is, we're set to conduct a detailed and structured analysis of a data set containing building requests, and we want you to analyze, right? So let's see if it's going to work. And by the way, all right, unusual activity. This is why we also recorded this, knowing that this live demo could right? But I wanted to do it live so that you could see it's not manufactured. So it's really helpful. It's very pleasant. It says like, it sounds like a great idea, and it tells you what it needs to do. We're gonna load the data. We're gonna clean up the data. We're gonna do even an initial exploration for you. We might even create some visualizations. We're gonna do some statistical analysis. Might include correlation and regression. We're gonna create all of this work for you. So now, and it even asks you, like, if I'm going to do all these, do you want something else, or do you want me to proceed with it? So it tells me just like, by following these steps, you could do what you want to do. And now let's jump in. First off, what we want to do is, we want to load the sample data. And this is why it's important to use the paid version, and it is $20 a month. I'm not, sponsored by ChatGPT by all, but I think $20 a month is one of the best investments and expenditure that I have. So again, first off, we're going to copy and paste. Now that you have the data, we want you to do this initial cleanup, because as you all know, most of the data that you're given, they're going to have missing values in it. And even that cleaning up process, it requires some sort of knowledge. And in this case, if you can ask the ChatGPT, here's my data set, just clean up the redundant or missing values for me, I'm just going to do it for you. So it's telling me that it's going to handle missing values. It's going to convert some of the date columns because they were not done well. Even if it shows you the code, then you can copy it and go somewhere else, right? I'm not doing anything, as you saw, I just copied and pasted what it wanted to do. So it is producing it for me. So now, let's go, because what I wanted to do is, yes, I have all these locations, but I would like to be able to group them in an area and then create a zone, almost like layers of the onions, and I want to put the city hall right in the middle so that I can actually represent the same work order in the zone 2, zone 3, zone 4, zone 5. It's going to take longer to do that. So, oh my God. Well, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. ChatGPT sometimes fails and it needs to regenerate, but it is still faster than everything else that you need to do. Maybe it's shy, but it comes through. Again, in this case, just like it did the initial cleaning for me. That could be a day's work, depending on your, and it could tie up an analyst, as you see. And the beautiful thing is about it finds an error. It appears that there was an issue with the distances, so I'm going to ensure that all missing coordinates are addressed. If you all want me to go to the recorded version, I'm happy to do so. See, it fixed it. I didn't even have to say anything. It understands what the problem is in the data set. It knows the job. It figured out some of the information was not coded correctly. Now, And I didn't even provide the city hall's coordinates. I just like find city hall, right? Just like I want you to create by simply saying it knows where the city hall is. Now it told me I'm going to create the 5 zones. And now that we have this information, I want it to go to some visual representation of what it found for me, because I would like to see that. And if you read the prompts, you could see that it's not complex. You don't need to speak scientific language. In this case, I used the ChatGPT to even make the prompts more efficient. Look at these prompts. How would you edit them? How would you improve them to say less, to get more? And it'll revise it for you. Then once it's done, I asked it to put all of those prompts in one place. Basically, as you see, it's already giving me the correlation metrics that I have, like a strong correlation between the distance and the duration. It also shows me some scatter plot as to where the distances are and the days open. But interesting thing here is going to tell me that the correlation, there is not a huge degree of variability between the distance if you look at all of the work orders. And then that's an interesting fact. It says just like, yes, your hypothesis of maybe the distance impacts, but it tells me when I looked at all of the work orders, I see some correlation, but not a full correlation. So we want to dig deeper. So rather than just like looking at all of the work, now I'm going to lean in to those where you see this correlation a little bit more, where there is a specific distance to work order duration time. So I'm not telling which ones that it needs to look at. I'm saying just like between the data set you told me, there is some slight correlation with some more than others, and I'm telling you just like now segment the work order into even more. So now it's telling me here's all the work orders in the different zones, and it allows me to compare how the average completion time varies across problem types and the geographical segments. Next up is, okay, I see the problem types, and let's go to even more focused analysis. Get to those problem types and go even deeper and give me more insights. And it's relentless in its mission. It's very, very clear. It takes maybe like a minute or so. And we're focusing on now the work order duration of selected problem types that are hypothesized to have positive correlations with the distance. Utilize the zone data for the detailed insights. So I'm digging in deeper. Just like give me more, not just all of them, just give me more. What do you see based on these days open and then the duration? So, just going back to our presentation, because the next part is just going to be harder to show there. I have recorded this video for you to show the last portion of it. We've gone this far. Create the summary statistics, zone definitions, the scatter plot. It created the correlation matrix. It showed us all of the data. And just want to pause here. As you see, it's telling me that the correlation analysis across the jobs, there's the elevators, environmental, HVAC, painting, and preventative maintenance. Specifically in the preventative maintenance, you should not expect to see a huge correlation. Preventative maintenance is preventative maintenance. You go and change a filter. Why would changing a filter one location should be different than the other one? So if we looked into this one, we realized there is a very strong correlation between these two. And basically, it's telling me that 88.7% variability in days open. And then this number means that for each unit increase in the zone, the days open will increase by 10 days. So this is a very high-level statistical analysis that, now it's telling me that the regression results that shows me that for this specific work type, which we were able to dig down, we didn't know where we were going to go, we just had a hypothesis, we wanted to understand. Now it's telling me your PM work sucks, and then you need to be better because it shouldn't be different this way. And it's telling me that I can specifically see and correlate that almost a +1 correlation, and every time the zone goes up, the duration goes up by 10 days. And it gives me a good interpretation of this one, but the beautiful thing about it is that I asked to write me an executive summary at the end. And I want to show you just like what it was doing. So let me pull this back up a little. I'm sorry, it's resetting. My bad. Again, the zones, the distribution, all of the analysis. Keep asking questions. Keep asking questions. It's giving you now just like, give me more, give me more. It's like, all right, I dug these, I found these for you, and here's where the memo is. It gives me a detailed analysis, data cleaning. It told me what it did, statistical insights, segmented and focused analysis. And in here, it's telling me that the findings underscore the impact of geographic distance of work order reduction times, particularly for maintenance related. The strong correlation for preventative maintenance suggests that logistical challenges due to distance could be impeding operational efficiency. Recommendations. I didn't even ask for recommendations, but it's telling me that I should be looking at my resource allocation, increasing staffing, maybe process optimization, and continuous monitoring and adjustment. And it gave me data visualizations to add to my memo if I want to. And what we did was the process optimization. But to getting to this point to do the process optimization took us months, and multiple analysts working directly on this one. Right now, I mean, under this live stress, we were able to get to the same thing, within 10 minutes. And I want to know, with raise of hands right now, how many of you feel a little bit more comfortable using a tool like this by speaking in plain English, articulating what you're looking for, and for the assistant to give you the insights to do your job. That's what I wanted to show you. The barrier to entry might look like it's a big summit you need to climb, but the helicopter is here to take you to the summit so that you can ski down. All you need to know is if you can think and if you can speak English, you could interact with this bot or any other bot. You could upload your documents and ask the questions, and if you want to ask better questions, just tell them that this is the data set, this is what I want to do, what should I ask, and it will even give you. So if that's the case, I'm all inviting you to jump in the sandbox and then start playing it. Don't worry about the complexity of the code. Don't worry about, I don't know anything about analysis. It is the future. It is not replacing us, but it is making us much more efficient. Right now, with this technology, all of my analysts can get to the questions a lot faster. So their time is now being used to really actually solving the problem rather than doing all of the analytical work, that retooling it, cleaning it up, and asking the questions. By the time they get to it, the time's run out, they're tired, they don't have the capacity to do so. But right now, everything is before them, it's guiding them, they can ask the questions, and they can do the real work. So I hope that you can take this away, and then with you, and then starting your journey to do more analysis, or anything that you want to do with some of these AI tools. Thank you very much.
Right.
A little bit of a snack, but expected. But we wanted to do the live.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Good job. Was that cool or what? Huh? I feel better. How about you? Thank you, Andrew and Berke, for that excellent presentation. I do feel personally better, and in fact, I think I might go home this afternoon and go play in the sandbox. Yeah. I'd like to it's now my honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Nishant Shah. He was appointed last year as Maryland's first senior advisor for responsible artificial intelligence. Governor Wes Moore issued an AI executive order, also known as AIEO. I actually saw that somewhere. The alphabet's everywhere. The governor issued an executive order that will guide Shah's work, calling for the responsible and productive use of the rapidly emerging technology. Previously, Nishant was a product leader for responsible artificial intelligence and open research at Murta, and a senior product manager at Amazon. He has also served as digital service expert at United States Digital Service, the White House and Africa director at Refunite, a technology nonprofit organization whose mission is to reconnect separated families from across the globe. Nishant holds a master's degree in advanced policy and economic analysis, climate policy at Columbia University, School of International and Public Affairs. We are indeed fortunate to have an expert like Nishant Shah to launch our conversation today. Nishant?
Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Can you guys hear me well? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, everyone, for the warm welcome today. And thank you to the Schaefer Center for the invitation to speak. And, I actually graduated from a public policy program myself almost 14 years ago now. And so, I've honestly never seen a more critical time than now for the use of these skills. So thank you for the work the Schaefer program does and for everyone for your work. And especially sort of for all the educators in here, the public sector professionals, the elected officials, the students. This is just a critical time for public service. Sort of given our topic today, I thought it would be only fitting that the first slide, and actually most of these that you'll see, has an image created by generative AI. And you'll see that it's a sort of like vaguely average state house with, blurred pillars representing what I assume is democracy. If you're curious, the prompt here was, you guessed it, integrating AI into the work of Maryland state government. So I'll be spending the next 25 minutes or so sort of taking you guys through exactly that, the state's evolving approach to AI. And I say evolving because we, as all states, are really in the midst of defining our strategy and running experiments. And the idea is to embrace and adopt best practices, to keep a pulse on the landscape, focus on building strong foundations rather than sort of chasing the next sexy, shiny object, and pivot as we learn and the context changes. So that said, I'll start with some high-level context. I'll move on to describing the policies and legislation that have set our direction. We'll discuss AI governance and pilots in the state. I'll speak to the issue of talent and ensuring that we have the right guidance as we move forward. And then we'll ponder a few potential next steps, and I'll leave you with some parting thoughts. So let's start by zooming out a little bit and painting a picture of the zeitgeist that we're in. There's an interesting sort of, let's call it a natural experiment that's playing out around the country and really around the world. 50 different states, hundreds of federal agencies and sub-agencies, thousands of counties and municipalities, all trying to develop a mental model and figure out how to adopt AI responsibly and ethically. The vibe feels sort of like that of the early internet, except on even more of an exponential curve. And we have this, potentially game-changing emergent technology, but with probably unhealthy current levels of hype and FOMO. And it's sort of impossible to predict the next sort of set of steps, the sort of direction that things will be moving, given how the space is evolving. And we see, this just continuous, constant flow of new academic papers, frameworks, products and companies, breakthroughs in model capabilities, geopolitical changes, chips advances, new laws and policies, implications on workforce and economy and security. And all that combines to create a pace of change that is absolutely unprecedented. And of course, the level of sophistication and seriousness that governments are approaching this with varies massively. From the Department of Homeland Security building out an entire AI core, getting essentially top folks to scrub in with a board made up of the who's who in industry, a board which, by the way, includes Governor Moore, announced sort of recently, to smaller municipalities that can only allocate really one person to drive AI efforts as a sort of part-time job. So, sometimes this is happening in silos, and sometimes there's deep engagement across borders and industries and sectors. Now, zooming into Maryland and the opportunities here, I think it's fair to say that the lens we're taking is one of pragmatic optimism. Governor Moore is bullish on AI, both its use in government and the potential economic development opportunities for the state, but he also understands that there are significant risks. The quote on this slide is from the announcement of the state's executive order on AI, which I'll get to in just a bit, and it really captures the state's stance. We know there's a lot of perspectives around AI. Some are very concerned, some are really excited, but the tech is here, and we can either choose to fall behind or to embrace it with thoughtfulness and nuance, and we're choosing the latter. Now, one truism in state government is that we're resource constrained, and we don't have, a lot of levers to pull to quickly improve state services, from benefits provision to disaster response. And, there's a chance that leveraging AI could be one of these few levers that we have. So I see it as a moral imperative that we figure out how to get it right. And given how incredibly early we are in the AI journey, and to get to the point where our capabilities match our ambitions, we need to do a lot this year to get our foundation sound. And that's really the theme of 2024 for us: build the foundations, increase our AI IQ, and create momentum. Now, don't be afraid of this slide. There's a lot of text, but I just want to sort of put this here because as I describe our approach, I do want you to keep in mind not just opportunities, but also the risks from AI and the challenges to the state in leveraging it. And those are two different categories. On the risk side, this is probably a lot of the things that you've already heard about: bias, misinformation, deepfakes, hallucinations, etc. And I won't go through each, but suffice it to say that the risks of AI without guardrails are real today. They're often different from traditional software, and they need to be managed in unique ways. Then on the challenges side, these are the obstacles and difficulties that are specific to the state rather than specific to the technology that we'll need to address. And we'll get to a number of these later in the presentation. The takeaway I want you to have from this slide is that we tend to overestimate what changes in a year, and we tend to underestimate what changes in 5 years, and in this space, much less than that. The implication there is that new types of harms will continue to surface, so this list will continue to grow. And that, in turn, will require frameworks and policy that is adaptive and allows for change. So in light of all that, back in September when I joined the administration, we had a lot of conversations about what to do, when, and using what mechanisms. How might we cohere action across the state, which is quite federated and decentralized in how it leverages technology, around responsible and productive use of AI? What legislation could we expect, and how might executive and legislative action synchronize and supplement and enshrine? So we came to the conclusion that the first step should be an executive order in order to set a clear direction for agencies, which the governor signed in mid-January. And it's worth, I think, spending some time here, as most of our near-term initiatives really spring from this source. So the EO does 6 things. 1, it establishes the principles that internal use of AI should abide by in the state. And I'll go through these in just a bit. 2, it establishes a governing body, what we're calling the AI sub-cabinet, that's responsible for executing the EO and advising the governor on all things AI. That ensures we have a group that makes high-level decisions, that has the power to spin up working teams, and is accountable for moving forward directives. 3, it mandates creating and operationalizing a clear AI governance framework. That includes both short-term stopgap efforts, because there is AI in use in the state today, as well as a more medium-term action plan, and to also get in place a clear understanding of what use cases constitute high risk versus lower risk. 4, it mandates us to upskill the state workforce and to get in short-term talent. This means trainings for the overall workforce to build intuition around AI and using tools responsibly in the sort of way that the previous presenters showed us. It also means structuring partnerships and getting short-term pathways in place, like fellowships with academia, creative contractual paths, etc., that can sort of get in the expertise to help the state on its journey. Number 5, it asks for a set of deep dives and recommendations in really 3 key domains: economic development, workforce, and security. That's meant to ensure that we're doing the really key horizon scanning that's sort of necessary with regards to AI impacts more broadly, in a way that's highly specific to Maryland's people, our infrastructure, workforce, our industrial base, economy, port system, energy grid, etc. And the idea is to yield a canonical set of recommendations for the governor and for the legislature, and to bring together the right set of experts in and out of government to get there. Number 6, it asks for experimentation in the form of proofs of concept and pilots. So, more on that later, but the idea is really here to sort of build our AI muscle and to get some initial data and practice in promising areas, because the best way to learn is by doing. So I mentioned the first part of the EO establishes the state's AI principles. There are 6 of them, and you can see these as the backbone and the North Star for our AI strategy, to guide our policy, to guide our adoption, and to guide oversight. And these are primarily drawn from NIST's risk management framework. NIST is a sort of government body that creates standards of this type, and the AI Bill of Rights. And they're in line with the sets of principles that a lot of other institutions are adopting as well, for good reason. Fairness and equity, this acknowledges that AI can perpetuate biases and discrimination and stereotypes in its outputs, something that the state use of AI must take into account. Innovation means that we're committed to exploring all the different ways that AI can be adopted in human-centered and mission-aligned ways. Privacy means that individuals' privacy rights are protected by design in our use of AI. Validity and reliability acknowledges that AI systems can change over time, so we should have a way of ensuring that they're working as intended, particularly if they're used to help make decisions. And then finally, transparency, accountability, and explainability. And this essentially says that our use of AI should be clearly documented and disclosed, and that the outputs of AI systems should be understandable and explainable in terms of how they came about. Now, the EO, of course, is just one type of policy, and building on that and the principles is also legislation. And on that front, the legislature passed SB 818, the AI Governance Act of 2024, just a few weeks ago, and it's now awaiting the governor's signature. That bill does a few different things. 1, it codifies elements of the EO into law, and particularly the AI subcabinet. 2, it establishes a definition of AI in statute. And this is really key, so we know exactly what kinds of systems we're actually talking about and that these different principles and policies actually apply to. 3, it requires the state to conduct regular AI inventories and impact assessments focused on bias. More on that in a bit. It establishes the concept of high-risk AI that requires greater oversight. These are systems that have the potential to be rights impacting or safety impacting. It establishes a procurement pathway to more easily conduct proofs of concept. This is crucial because existing procurement approaches don't let us experiment in the ways that we need to with this rapidly changing a technology as AI. And finally, it mandates a broad roadmap forward covering a range of different areas related to AI, from sector-specific guidelines in places like healthcare and education and elections, to training of the state workforce to a number of different areas. So in aggregate, the EO and legislation sets out our high-level direction. But of course, the devil's in the details here, and we've begun work on a number of these initiatives. To get us started, or to at least start going a bit deeper, let's start with the responsible use front. And this is really the work to ensure that as we leverage AI to improve workflows and services, it's done in a way that centers our principles and avoids harm. The key point I want to make here is that we're not looking to reinvent the wheel. There's amazing work coming out of NIST, various federal agencies, industries, civil society, and academia. So we're adopting existing frameworks and taking guidance from proven approaches around the world. And the knowledge, especially with the knowledge that these will continue to evolve and that we'll need to adapt them to our particular context. I think the clear place to start here is fleshing out and operationalizing each AI principle that we've adopted. This is essentially the work to make them real, and it's the umbrella category that all other responsible AI work can fit within. Most of it will leverage in this risk management framework and its generative AI addendum, which just came out a few weeks ago, but a few other sources as well. And this work looks different for each principle, but the easiest way, I think, to talk about it is to really take one as an example and go through some of the questions that we're asking internally within the state as we work through it. So let's take fairness and equity, the principle that I just spoke about, established by the executive order. What does it actually look like to take into account and mitigate fairness and equity issues inherent in the AI tools that we adopt? What use cases is that particularly important in so that we can prioritize those and help us determine the taxonomy of what falls into a high versus low risk bucket? What set of qualitative outcomes and requirements must be in place to consider our fairness principle met? Once we understand what that idea looks like, what set of things need to be in place for the state to have confidence that we're meeting that standard, and how do we operationalize those? And on that front, might intermittent audits sort of be the right path here, or might it be some set of metrics that we ask from model providers that can serve as leading or lagging indicators of harm? If we do find instances of bias and discrimination manifesting through an AI system, maybe through a process of determining benefits eligibility or providing services, what does it look like to mitigate those issues or to offer opt-outs? Particularly as we'll primarily be procuring the tools we use rather than building them ourselves. What are the short-term mitigations to take on versus the longer-term projects? In other words, what's the maturity model that we're following? As we get more and more knowledge here, and as we sort of move down the curve, we should get more sophisticated and be able to do more things. We know at the very least that some form of risk assessments embedded into our software intake processes would be needed, and actually now required by law, and some form of continuous monitoring over time. We also know that some set of procurement standards and checklists and contract language and information provision by vendors will be needed. And that part I want to sort of highlight. This is particularly crucial. A procurement playbook that our agencies can run where they can have confidence that the responsible use and productive use elements are taken into account. And finally, but I think equally important, as we get processes in place and issue guidebooks and sort of playbooks and guidance, we need to ensure as low touch a process as possible here. So how might we combine existing cybersecurity and privacy and AI governance requirements so that they're streamlined and less cumbersome for those actually going through them? We don't want to slow down the business of state government even more than it already feels slow sometimes. And I'll note here that this is a forever process. Frameworks will improve, the tech will change, and we'll have to alter our governance mechanisms in response to that. But eventually, the artifacts that we create here will integrate into existing teams, and they'll become more effectively integrated into our processes. So on that front, later this year, we intend to put out V1 of a broad responsible use policy, which institutionalizes our AI governance and goes through playbooks on sort of all of these different components. Another, I think, responsible use artifact that I thought would be useful to highlight for this group, and something that we would need, and really any government would need to power almost any of these efforts, is a better understanding of current AI use across the state and a canonical way to tell what AI is in use where at any given time. And this is particularly for those AI systems that we deem as being higher risk. Current use is pretty low in the state, but requests are increasing really rapidly. We're getting quite a few on a sort of weekly basis now. And that includes things in the existing side of the bucket, like license plate readers and facial recognition for mobile driver's license requests to, fraud detection and a variety of process automation efforts. There's also what we call shadow IT. And this is the use of publicly available software and AI without our knowledge, sometimes on personal devices. We know this is quite pervasive with the sort of more popular tools like DALL-E and ChatGPT. So we'll need to stand up an inventory of all AI use cases in the state at any given time with clear guidelines on what should be captured, the types of metadata that would enable true oversight, and how that might change as a greater percentage of our stack over time is actually powered by AI. There's also data inventories and asset inventories and all sorts of inventories that the state already does. So we'll look to combine an AI inventory with those existing efforts. Another sort of pressing need here is to issue guidance to Maryland agencies on leveraging generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Copilot and DALL-E and the many others that are popping up. This is actually something that we'll be getting out in the next 2 days or so, and sort of posting on our website, so I think it's quite timely. And it's really important because it unlocks the sort of work that the previous presenters just sort of presented, experimenting with widely available AI tools that can potentially help state staff do their work more efficiently, and rather than experimenting in the dark, let folks do it in the light. And we're combining this with surveys to understand how folks are actually using these tools over time, which will tell us which use cases to invest in more deeply. For example, if a high percentage of folks use it for RFP generation, can we more easily make the case to prioritize that on a roadmap for a solution that's more fit for purpose there? We're also starting to offer an async training, likely starting this summer, on how generative AI for public servants can be leveraged, in partnership with this absolutely fantastic group called Innovate US, and we'll make that sort of publicly accessible as well. And given that generative AI tools are currently in their Wild West phase, we're also standing up an approval process for those tools that looks at their terms and conditions, ensures they're in line with the state's laws and policies, and makes a determination. So moving on to the productive use side, our actual use, and the whole reason why we're doing this, our focus here on 2024 is really on experimentation, on pilots, and getting in place shared infrastructure and procurement pathways. Now, our goal at the moment is to prioritize a set of use cases that map well to the governor's state plan and that represent buckets of particular promise, both leveraging generative AI, but also classical AI. We'd structure these experiments, identify a clear success metric, partner with a vendor, and see if we can move the needle on that metric in a few months. That'll give us the initial learning curves that we need to get better at procuring, to practice applying our AI principles to specific use cases, to understand what contracts would actually look like here, and help us gain experience in what actually deploying projects looks like, with all the pitfalls and learnings inherent there, particularly on the data governance side, because garbage in, garbage out. And it'll also help us figure out what a sandbox could look like. In other words, how best to test generative AI solutions in particular against the principles that we've adopted and prior to getting them into production. Now, if we can prove out that a technology works well for a specific use case and get a set of vendors who can do that work well, and then provide that continuously updated sort of, let's call it a groomed use case repository to agencies, that would be the ultimate goal. And given that, these initial use cases should be quite low risk, yet high value, highly repeatable, and feasible, meaning that the opportunity has the right data teams and motivation. And I think about these use cases really in 2 buckets. The first one is, how might we take time, cost, and drudgery out of agency workflows? This is the really unsexy but important stuff, and it's where we're really focusing to start, because use cases here tend to be lower risk and easier to experiment with. An example is natural language data analysis in our Security Operations Center, a proof of concept that we'll be kicking off early this summer. The level of cybersecurity issues the state manages is increasing rapidly year on year, but our resources to sort of underpin and protect against that are not. And so can the analysts who staff this work do the investigations, essentially remove hours or days of time by making it exponentially easier to do the data analysis and the visualization that kicks off that work. Deep data analysis is a workflow in many, many state agencies, so learning from this example could lead to improvements in many others. Another example here that we're kicking off is permitting and licensing. The state is responsible for permits and licenses and certifications in myriad areas. Can we help permit analysts and engineers much more quickly and accurately review applications against their requirements to reduce the time it takes to essentially process a permit? We're exploring a partnership here between the Department of Environment and an external partner called US Digital Response to do some discovery and run a proof of concept. If it works, you can imagine that permitting workflows across agencies tend to have a lot of overlap. So it could be something that's highly scalable and lead to benefits across the board. Now, the second use case theme is, how might we make government services on the front end easier, faster, more robust, and more pleasant, really, to interact with? basically help residents cut through bureaucracy. There's incredible potential, for example, in translation, in plain language, in accessibility, perhaps using chatbots, or enterprise search, or novel-generated content, or some other pathway, because these pathways will change pretty rapidly over the coming months and years. These are more resident-facing tools rather than staff-facing, which means that there's also more risk for bias and privacy issues, meaning more oversight needs to be, or at least oversight needs to be stronger than it is today. So we're moving a bit more slowly with this bucket, but are exploring the right places to start. Now, outside these proofs of concept, agencies are also moving forward with their own projects this year, and we want to ensure that we have some short-term engagement mechanisms in place to help them think through opportunities prior to having playbooks and a responsible use policy shipped. We're in the midst of figuring out what this looks like, and at the very minimum, we want to have a defined taxonomy of high versus low risk use cases so that it's clear to agencies when to seek further help. Now, beyond the governance and use cases side, there's a lot of work to be done to set these efforts up for success, which basically means having the right people, the right processes, the right partnerships, and the right collaborations in place. We can roughly split this work into an internal focus, so within government, and an external focus outside of government. Internally, all of this work is an absolutely brand new effort for the state, and it's inherently cross-functional. So we need to ensure that we have the right setup to move forward. There's a few sort of relevant initiatives going on here. One is, and I mentioned it before, we're in the midst of cohering the work of the AI sub-cabinet, the state's governing body around AI. And we need to ensure that it connects to the work happening in agencies, that it has the right folks at the table, and that it has an agenda-setting capability that's done with intention. It'll need to have the right escalation paths and build working norms. So this is sort of a work in progress at the moment. And we'll also reevaluate later in 2025 if this is the right sort of body to be governing these sorts of efforts at that point. We're also kicking off a statewide community of practice soon to ensure that lessons learned and best practices are widely adopted, and also to have in place, essentially to have a place to target trainings and create cross-agency working groups. This will be an active co-creation facilitated by a number of different folks across agencies, and we hope it becomes a valuable space that distributes knowledge more effectively. And this shouldn't just be IT folks, by the way. This should be something quite interdisciplinary, so lawyers and procurement officials and others, given the many sort of different skill sets that are required to build AI into our work confidently. We're in the midst of also getting the right organizational structures and roles in place as well. So at the same time as we're kicking off the AI work, there's a new governance, risk, and compliance team spinning up, for example, and a new Maryland digital service. And our current thinking is to start by taking a more centralized incubation approach with AI, hiring a few key roles to help build out policies and playbooks and cohere pilots and product execution. But over time, we'd like for that to get it slotted into existing digital and privacy and governance teams. And that said, we'll reevaluate based on what works, and this will likely have to go through a number of different iterations. On the training front, this is finding and embedding trainings that help state staff develop intuition around using AI. We'll partner, as I mentioned before, with a number of external folks to get these trainings up soon, initially starting by targeting the broad workforce, but ideally over time, we also want trainings that are specific to particular role types. So procurement officials, as I mentioned before, or auditors or executives of agencies. On the external partnerships and engagement side, we know that we'll have to rely on expert partners to help us think through next steps on both the governance and the product use sides. And the first area that we're looking to cohere in the coming months is an advisory board for the sub-cabinet, to be made up of experts across sectors that represent a variety of archetypes here. This would likely be a rotating body of folks that would serve in a personal capacity rather than representing their institutions. And we'll draw folks from a variety of different spaces. With academia, we are just absolutely blessed to have amazing institutions in Maryland with deep AI expertise. And my sense is that incentives are really well aligned and supply and demand is strong at sort of that state and university nexus. So we're in conversations with a number of different universities to figure out how best to partner here. As part of that advisory body I mentioned, as experts providing input and research into specific domains, as short-term talent to push forward specific initiatives that require expertise. And on that last front, I would absolutely love to find ways to embed fellows, with expertise around AI from various schools on AI projects across the state. With industry, this is where many of the solutions and innovation will come from. Many of these companies have deep expertise also in operationalizing responsible AI. And of course, we want to experiment with use cases broadly. And so, to do that, we need to sort of keep an ear to the ground to hear what's coming down the pike. With civil society, there's an increasing number of amazing organizations that offer trainings, pro bono AI expertise, that convene AI ecosystems and solve common problems across states and governments. There's also those that represent and advocate for marginalized voices and who focus on implications within AI development there. So we need all those voices at the table. With labor, there's work to be done to ensure that ways that AI is adopted in the state centers workers and people. There's also clearly fear and I think uncertainty sometimes about the longer term impacts of AI. So ensuring that those voices are at the table is also crucial. So that is the 10,000-foot view of what we're up to in the state. Hopefully it gives you a sense of some of our initiatives and how we're integrating AI into the work of state government. We're really focused this year on getting these foundational puzzle pieces in place, standing up key governance artifacts, running proofs of concept, doing some horizon scanning, and using the learnings from all of these different activities to put together a much longer term roadmap. And it's tough to predict the future, and we could probably spend an hour here, but I'll give 4 quick thoughts. First, the work of cohering an enterprise-wide adoption strategy around AI is really up next. In other words, moving from experimentation and piloting, which we're currently doing, to production and scale. And that requires a different set of approaches and is a whole different beast. So that's something we'll start thinking about soon. Second, a lot of this work will result in overall policies that unlock use. But many sectors will require much more detailed guidance. I think about healthcare and education as great examples here. There's also true for certain horizontals, like hiring and recruitment. So once we get the basics in place, we'll seek to work with agencies on what would be useful to unlock responsible use in these various areas. Third, we'll think about places where we can actually contribute to the state of the art rather than just receiving. So for example, the state collects really unique data sets that essentially no one else does. Things like local algal blooms or wildlife counts over time. What might it look like to provide those types of data sets, those long-term data sets really, in a privacy-protected manner to academic researchers who can leverage them as machine learning data sets to produce societally useful research and tools? Fourth, we'd like to more deeply integrate our work with other states, federal entities, our counties and municipalities. We already stay in close touch with a lot of other states and federal entities to share learnings and take things that are working elsewhere, and we engage in a number of these forums in a leadership capacity and on the boards of a number of these. But we're aware that much more can be done and that the benefits of that collaboration are significant. So to conclude, I'll note that I believe pretty strongly that what we do in the next 2 years in terms of setting the guardrails, in terms of building the rules of the road, in terms of choosing where we invest or not invest, and who we partner with, these choices that we make now will matter for the next decade or more. And if you're interested in this space, let me just say that it's a fantastic time to get involved, and the time really when pen's being put to paper. So feel free to send me an email. My email address is on the slide. I'll be around for lunch as well, and thanks everyone here for the work that you do and for choosing service in this crucial time.